For the month of May for the city of Roswell. For y'all just tuning in, we started 7 minutes late because of a glitch that we had with getting it out for public on Monday. So we wanted to be in within the means of what we're supposed to be doing in the timeline of 72 hours. So we're starting the meeting. I now call the meeting to order. If we could have roll call.
Councilor Perry?
Here.
Councilor Oropesa? Here. Councilor Roebuck?
Here.
Councilor Kinnard? Here. Chair Perry, you have a quorum.
All right, and if we could get an approval of the agenda.
I make a motion.
A motion to approve the agenda as currently stated. We'll go through some things in here later concerning some of the issues.
Second.
We have a second. Any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, approval of the minutes from March 31st. Of course, I was not on the council at the time, and some may not have been members of the meeting at the time, but I was present at the meeting, and the draft looked correct to me. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Mr. Chair, move to approve the minutes of the March 21st Finance Committee meeting.
March 31st, yeah.
Or March 31st, yes.
Second.
March 31st, yes.
And second, any discussion? All in favor by signifying by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, non-action items, information reports. We've got all this here. So who's going to start us off with presentations? All right, Monica.
Good morning, Chairman Perry, members of the committee. So we're going to start looking at our reports. This month we have 3 to present to you. The first one is your gross receipts tax report. No, I don't. Oh, I do. Sorry.
I think we may have someone that's joining us by phone right now, probably part of presentations. If you can hear me and you're joining by phone for presentation, if you can press the mute on your phone for just a little bit until we bring you up. We're getting some background noise here. Having a few IT problems. Give us just a moment. Okay. That's on there.
Okay, our first report is our gross receipts tax report. We're reporting for April 2020. Our collection for April 2020 was $2.4 million with a budget of $2.7 million. That came in at $266,000 less than we budgeted. Right now, total collection over budget is $3.7 million. We are at a 12.96% increase, and that's with 10 months collected. You're seeing the graph in front of you that you're seeing is a GRT actual 3-year trend. So I believe it's our green. Well, actually, it's our gray line that's showing a little dip under the rest of the 2 years. So we believe that the collection reason, because March was, half pretty sustainable. We still believe that we have a few people that may have reported their gross receipts but did not pay it. And that's what we're getting from Santa Fe. So that's where we are right now. Next, you have your lodger's tax report. This report is for March 2020. We have not completed our April 2020 report just yet because we collect the tax up to the 25th of each month. So for March 2020, we collected $76,000 with 20,280 rooms rented. The budget for the month, the budget is $95,970. And with 9 months collected, we are up in lodger's tax $67,259. Any questions?
Any questions concerning the lodger's tax? Let's give just a second, see if we can figure out what, is that someone on a phone that's just not muted, or? Okay, all right, we're gonna keep trying this. Okay, go ahead, go further.
The next report is your convention center fee report for March 2020. Collections were at $43,000. We have a budget of $55,000 for the month. With 9 months collected, we've collected $12,155 over the budget for the year. Any questions?
Any questions concerning the convention center fee? All right, next.
So those are the reports for this month. We do owe you an investment report that did not arrive, so as soon as I receive that, I will email that to you. I should have that by Friday, but we haven't had much change there, so.
Okay, all right. Okay. All right, what have we got next on the Capitals project list report?
We have Mr. Juan Fuentes, who is going to present to you the capital project list for fiscal year 20.
Good morning. I don't think
Is your
we've got any
microphone on?
sound.
Microphone on?
All right, thank you. All right, so what I'd like to do is just give a quick update and overview of the capital projects as we have them year to date. I provided you all with a PowerPoint presentation that I will be going over, as well as a more detailed list on legal size paper of all of the projects. In my PowerPoint, I will not be going over every single project, but I just want to highlight some of the projects as to where we are on the status of those projects, how some of them will be carrying over into the new fiscal year, and as we plan for the FY21 budget. So we'll go ahead and get started. So what I wanted to present first is just some quick bullet points. The city manager did issue a senior staff communications in regards to the FY20 year-to-date capital projects. And what I wanted to, well, what I have here is just a quick overview of some of the topics I will be covering. The FY20 year-to-date capital projects. The reallocation of capital expenses, one of the things that we're doing is we're moving some of the projects, whether they're in the capital improvement fund, over to the road fund, some of the projects from the general fund over to the capital improvement fund, so that they're in the right fund as we move into the new fiscal year. And as I stated, we'll be covering some of those projects, as well as some of the projects that we're recommending for suspension at this time, or to put them on hold until we figure out what the outlook is going to look in the fiscal year 21 budget. And then some of the timelines for fiscal year 21, some of the projects that we did for last year in reviewing the master list, along with some of the projects for prioritization and including in the ICIP. So we'll cover some of that. Okay, now we can cover some of the city manager's communications. The city manager issued an email on March 20th directing all staff that no new projects or activities should be started for the next 30 days. Projects that are 75% completed should proceed. Projects that are up to 75% completed should be brought to a balance suspension similar to weather delays. Then on April 23rd, additional budget measures was for the reallocation of expenses to other budgets. So since those directives were issued, we kind of took a closer look of all of the outstanding projects, and that's how we ended up developing this list of year-to-date current outstanding projects and the recommendation of reallocating some of those expenses. So what I want to do before I get into the individual project, I just wanted to provide a quick overview of the long legal-sized spreadsheet and all the different columns that you have. Some of this information will be familiar to you all when you look at the master list. What I wanted to just provide the section here that provides the project information. The first column describes just the item for that fund. We talk about the department sector that the funding is allocated under. We have the project title, project description, and then any notes. Some of the notes include like if it was a current encumbrance, if it's a project that has been approved by council, the responsible department that will be overseeing this project, and then of course you see the column where it says percentage completed, and then the DFA dashboard project number or City of Roswell PO number. This column is important because either one, it will identify whether this project has been issued a grant or whether it's being paid out by city funds and we have already issued a PO, which in turn has encumbered for that project. And as you will see, the amount awarded or encumbered. The next section of the report covers the financial information piece of each individual project. As you can see there, it will show you the approved budget, any unapproved amount, what is the city share, what is the state share, whether it's a grant, any other, because we do have loans, so that's the column we would use to account for any other sources for this project. And then we start going into any revenue that we've received for that project if it's grant related. This helps us to kind of track how much of that money we have already requested from the state. And the last two columns at the end is what we're using to, project what is going to be budgeted for in fiscal year 21, okay? So what I want to do now is just kind of, like I said, just give a quick overview of some of the major projects in the report. If there's any question, I can definitely address those. In this first slide here, in the Infrastructure Fund 2601, we have, as we stated, we're reallocating. We have some of the projects like the Southwall Netting Project. That was a current year project that has already been completed. So that is 100% complete and will be paid for by the end of the fiscal year. So that will be liquidated and completed. We also have the Zoo Cougar exhibit. This project is split between two funds. It is split between this fund as well as the donation fund because there's a share funding source for that. Our city share is $291,000 for this project. We are at 21% complete, so that will be carrying over into the next fiscal year. We also have a project for Consolidated Dispatch. That's about a $310,000 project, and right now that project will also carry over into next fiscal year. Those are some of the other projects that we have in the infrastructure fund include Carpenter Park, include the Veterans Cemetery. As you can see there in those two projects, at the time when I developed this report, there hasn't been any activity. The Carpenter Park has been recently awarded by the council. One of the things I do want to bring to you all's attention is that we did receive notice from the State Department of Finance Administration letting everybody know that any grant that has not been issued a grant agreement or a notice of obligation will be frozen. The one project in this list that has not received a notice of obligation is the Veterans Cemetery. I did verify with Abraham that we did receive a notice of obligation for the Splashpad project, so we'll be able to proceed forward hopefully, unless the state decides to make any other changes. There's other projects that we'll identify that could be impacted as well. But for the most part, a lot of the projects that we have with state agreements, we already have notice of obligations for. And as you can see, the third project on the list is the Master Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, and that project is almost complete. Yes, sir.
We have a question from fellow councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick note on the Splashpad Splashpad. I saw on, I think it was general, one of the other committees, there was an additional $3,900 attached to it. Can you explain that?
There was if the amount you're asking about is the additional contingency number, there is the approved amount for the project. What the abstract requested was to approve the award of the awarded amount in addition to a 10% contingency. Because when the project gets started, it seems to never fail that something may come up that we might need an additional amount to be able to pay for a change order. So that might be the amount. I don't have the specific number, but there was an additional 10% requested for contingency.
It was my understanding that there would be no additional money attached to this particular project.
Well, in all of the project is grant money. It's not going to be an addition, so the awarded amount is under the grant amount. So there is still grant money available, and that's the reason for the additional 10% contingency.
But it's coming out of general fund, the 3,000 whatever?
Oh, the grant. It's coming from the grant.
Okay, because it made it sound like the city was going to be responsible for an additional 3,000 and.
Oh, I believe, okay, so what you're referring to is the CES fee. The grant does not pay the CES fee. Because we're using CES to purchase this, to enter into this agreement with the vendor. CES does charge a fee for using their service, and the grant does not pay for that fee, does not cover that fee. So that is the fee that we have to cover ourselves,
Okay.
because we're using that method of procurement.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, proceed, go ahead.
Okay. So, moving on, so the next set of projects I'd like to cover are in the road fund. And again, as you see here, one of the projects, the first project listed there is the Deming Bridge. This is a project that at this time is only for design only. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is one of those projects that has a state agreement, and but is only for the design portion of it. The next project is the Country Club and Main Traffic Signal Project that was just recently awarded by the council, and that's moving forward as well. That project will likely go into the next fiscal year 21. We have the South Atkinson Rehab Project. As you can see there on the percentage column, it has been 100% completed, so that will be closed out this fiscal year. And the final project is the Garden Bridge Reconstruction Project for an awarded amount of $911,000, and right now it's only at 15%, which again, that will be another project that will be carried over. And as well as, there's quite a bit other road projects in the big list. Some of the other projects we'll be covering now will be in the Water Enterprise Fund, specifically the water source of supply. The first project on the slide is the VFDs, variable frequency drives, for some of the wells. This is a project that I know staff request on an annual basis, because we want to install these drives on all of our wells to eliminate the hammering that happens on the wells, because we don't have a ramping up and a ramping down slowly in the system. The hammering effect does impact the lines in the wells, so it causes damage there. So that you'll see the first set of wells, 10, 11, and 18, for an amount of $554,000. That's at 35% complete. And then you have the other request, number 3, for wells 12, 13, 15, and 1, for another amount of $853,000, and that's only 10%. And the big project that we currently have ongoing right now is the Air Center water towers. And as you can see there, that's still under construction, and that's just one of many, one of the various POs that we have. So that project definitely will be carrying over. And we just received our first drawdown of the loan, first loan drawdown for that project of $2.4 million. So At least we have already spent 2.4 on this project, so we'll finish it up in the new fiscal year 21. On the next set of projects in the water department that I want to highlight, as you can see there, number 6 is the remaining portion for the air center towers. But we have a PO issued for $4 million. We also have the large diameter valve replacement project, and that has also been awarded as well. It does not have the awarded amount, but that's also about a $1.4 million project. And then finally, we have an emergency well generator that it was approved, as it's noted at the notes section by the council on April 9th. However, that is a project that we're kind of holding off right now, and to kind of see if it's really necessary to proceed forward with this project. However, because the council has approved this project, we'll kind of have to revisit it at some point, whether we come back to the council to ask for, to remove that project as an approved project or proceed forward with the project. That will be an additional discussion with the city manager and department staff if that money could be better used somewhere else, again, in light of our financial situation. So we'll be revisiting that project back. But I can tell you that in my conversations with Lorenzo Sanchez, who's overseeing the utilities and that side of the operation, he does feel that we can wait on this project. It's not urgently needed at this time, so that's the reason why we feel comfortable holding off on it. Now we're going to some of the wastewater projects. Again, we do have an ongoing study for dissolved oxygen study. It's only for the study only, and we're about only 5% completed of that project. So that's going to carry over into the next year. The city council did approve a loan for the screw press project at the wastewater treatment plant, and that's just in the early stages of the project. So that will be completed in fiscal year 21. Then you have a manhole rehab project. As you can see there, that still is, at this time, has very little activity, which will carry over into the new fiscal year. And finally, a Soar line replacement project as the last project for $187,000. So a lot of these projects will be carried over into the new fiscal year, which will be completed then. And we have some of the landfill projects. A lot of the landfill projects are paid for by the sanitation and landfill funds. We do not have any grants. We do not have any loans. This is all money that comes from the landfill and the sanitation fund. So we have like the Cell 5 construction project for $19,128, and this is a design of that. And then we have a sanitation security system, $13,000, and of course we did already receive and paid for a new grappler truck in the amount of $163,000. So what this slide shows here are some of the measures that we're taking in regards to the budgetary measures for reallocation of capital expenses. As you can see there, initially when we started, even in the past historically, we did budget some capital in the general fund. However, since we're using the capital improvement fund for various projects, then our recommendation is to move general fund capital expenses over to that fund so that we can use that fund to fund all projects that are not covered by enterprise. Enterprise has their own sources of money. Capital improvement fund will be used for all other projects. So we're shifting $930,000 of what we thought originally we were going to budget in the general fund over to the capital improvement fund. And then from the capital improvement fund, because they're road-related projects, at this time, we're moving $868,000 over to the road fund. And of course, you can see there that in the capital improvement fund, we had air center projects. So we're moving those air center projects to the air center, because sometimes when those projects, we have their grants or they require city match, the city match should come from those funds, not from another fund. So just to kind of make it fair and provide additional resources for other projects that do not necessarily generate their own funding, as an example, general fund projects. Year-to-date encumbrances, this is kind of just gives you a list of all of the departments that have encumbrances in projects. As you can see, they're both from capital project fund at $2.8 million all the way to the transit They also have some grants. So even these numbers, again, as we go through the next 2 months, they will change a little bit because hopefully some of the POs will be closed out, and only some of those amounts will be moving over to the new fiscal year. So we're still kind of fine tuning these numbers here. This chart graph here shows kind of just the distribution of all of the projects, with water making up 32% of all of the projects that we just went over. Wastewater with 26%. Again, water and wastewater, the reason primarily for the biggest share of the pie there is because of the loans that the water has for the towers and the loan for the screw press for the wastewater. Road has 15%, as you can see, 13% for capital project fund and so forth. So this just to kind of give you a visual of how it's distributed among the funds. And then the funding source, the last pie chart there, is we have grant at $3.1 million, and then we have a city share of about $9.9 million of the projects. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it would be nice to see that city share broken up into what's being paid from enterprise funds versus what's being paid from GRT, because I think that's a significant amount. But again, a lot of those city projects are water maintenance, as you just showed the slides earlier, and I think that'd make this particular slide a little bit more useful. And I think it's a very important way to look at the data. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I can add another slide that will break it down even further to make sure, what that number, where it's really truly coming from. So I'll work on that. So some of the projects they're on the big list that are recommended for being on hold, and we're still working through the budget numbers. And at the time that this was prepared, of course, we didn't know where we stood. Now we're getting a better picture in working with the budget, with staff and the city manager and the deputy manager. So now some of these projects, again, after we had an opportunity to visit a little bit further, maybe moving forward. One of the projects that listed there is another consolidated dispatch project for $420,000. At the general services meeting, we did talk about the library and the roof leaking, and that was a project that was identified as maybe having support for moving forward. That's why I put it on this list. That's $169,000 for that project. We also have a road project. This is a project that is also on your agenda for later today, and this project is for a match money of $130,000. Now, I can tell you both for this project and even another project that's on the big list that will require city match. Right now, our preliminary figures for the fiscal 21 budget do give us the necessary resources if the council would like to move forward with this project. So we'll be able to have those resources available. But I will leave that up to you all to discuss further. In the next slide, we have some of the water projects that we are putting on hold or suspension, some additional VFD wells, 1 through 4, for $900,000, because this is all city money. We have water line replacements for $640,000, and then we have another water line replacement project for $75,000. And finally, for the wastewater, 2 projects that we're putting on hold or suspension is additional sewer manhole rehab at $250,000 and a digester roof project for $145,000. And the final slide, just wanted to give you kind of just a quick overview of some of the timelines as we go through all of these projects, and we go through the process that we did last year in reviewing all of the master list of projects, prioritizing those lists by each of the committees, and creating the ICIP, and then in turn developing the top 5 for the legislative. So as you can see there, the committee presentations, the goal was to make this presentation to the committees in May, have the master list review by the committees in June, the final budget project allocations to happen in July, because we will be approving any final adjustments in July for the FY21 budget. And then, of course, develop the ICIP in August, and that gives us a little bit of room there before we develop the legislative top 5 in November. And the legislative session starts on January 21st. Again, with the current financial crisis or the COVID impact, there might not be necessarily be money available at the state. But again, this is just a timeline that can change. It's always better to have a list and not have a list if they ask for it. And with that, Mr. Chair and councilors, I will stand for any questions.
Any questions concerning the capital project list report? Yes, Councilor Orpesa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question, only a comment. I am concerned with the projects that are being recommended for suspension, because I think, or at least I heard when I was running for re-election, is one of the main things that everybody talked about was the streets.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important that if we can continue with the streets projects, I certainly would approve of that. And of course, some of the other ones are water projects, a roof project. Roofs seems to be one of those things that we haven't been paying attention to, like the library, for instance. I would certainly hate to put those on suspension, because again, the people are yelling and screaming that those are the projects that they want to see completed. And so I'm going to have a hard time, if it comes to a vote, voting to suspend some of these projects. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fuentes, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And so the reason why we listed them as, at this time, to suspend or put them on hold, it's not necessarily that we want to say we don't want to consider those projects. It's because as we're developing the budget and considering what's happening with our decline in GRT and all their other revenue sources, we're trying to get a good handle of what can we financially be able to move forward with the projects. So what I have presented here is at least all of the year-to-date encumbrances that we have POs on. So those things are in the system that we either have issued an agreement or we have something that is already kind of obligated. That's why, as I presented at the beginning, the directive from the city manager was, if this project already started and it's at 75%, we'll move forward. If it not, then we can kind of hold off on it. So that's what we're kind of doing as we develop the new budget. As an example, you talked about some of the road projects. If you look on page 3 and you look at item number 11, item number 11. Oh, I'm sorry. It's on this, the long, this one, yes. The legal size. And the project that I want to kind of just use as an example is the South Atkinson Road Rehab project. And as you can see there, under notes, this project is only for design only. If you look at the section of the page where it says city share, this project, I believe, we are getting close to $1 million grant. Our share of this project will be $544,000 as listed there. Now, this project has not even been encumbered in the system, which means that if we proceed forward with this road project, we'll need to have that available cash of $544,000 in addition to the project that's on your agenda coming up. That's about $600,000. At this time, our preliminary budget figures show that, okay, we can cover those two items if we have to. So, but that's the reason why some of the other projects, we're saying, let's wait until we close this fiscal year, We kind of revised the numbers if there's additional funding, again, as we went through the timelines of how we're going to proceed forward with prioritizing with new projects. If there's funding available, then that's when the council would reallocate any additional projects money. But that's just an example why, Councilor, at least at this time, we're saying, let's hold off on anything new, because we want to make sure we have the resources for those items that we've already committed to some extent.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor Roebuck.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the information. It's very well presented. I think the real pain is going to come when in some ways, slowing these things is the easy part. The real pain is going to come when we have to hit the other side of the budget, which is the operations piece. And the hard decisions that we're going to have to make are going to have to be between jobs and roads. Ultimately, and I hate to say that, that's not politically a popular thing to say, but we have to take everything into consideration, and I assume that all these projects will be revisited at some level based on when we settle out what we're going to be doing on the operations side, what kind of cuts are we going to do across operations, what kind of layoffs are we going to have to do across operations, because we cannot. The roads are an asset that we have to maintain, and we cannot neglect the roads. And that means that at some level, there's some things that we're going to have to make some hard decisions coming forward that aren't going to be popular. But I don't sense any sense from the staff that they're saying, hey, we should neglect the roads at all. So thank you, Chair.
Right.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, if I may expand just a little bit farther
Yes.
on that. If you'll pay attention to the slide that is up there, this is our tentatively proposed budget for next year. We are looking at $33 million in cuts and reductions of costs with that. If you look across there as to where we're at, the capital outlay available cash that we believe we're going to have will be $20 million less than what we had last year for our budget. There is $2.6 million of personnel costs in here. That's over 50 positions within the city that were budgeted last year that will not be budgeted the next year. And so as you walk through that, and the nice thing about projects, I think going off of what Councilor Rapace and Councilor Roebuck's positions are with that as well too, is that project can be delayed, project can come back as soon as we have the funds available. The challenge that each one of you will have is prioritizing what is the highest expense that we need to spend, and where is it going to be at. And I just want to give you kind of that overview shot, because the picture is not very pretty. I think it's manageable, and I think we're going to be able to get through this at the end of the day. But right now, this is a 25% reduction in what we spent, or what our budget was last year, to what it will be next year, based upon what we see happening with gross receipts and everything. I believe that all the city councilors were receiving a copy of an LFC report from the state, and the state is indicating that there will be severe reductions in cost. Mr. Fuentes had mentioned about what the DFA has already done about freezing any additional expenditures from those general fund dollars that they provided us. It's not going to be sweet, it's not going to be pretty, and but I will say that it is manageable. I think we're actually very I guess we're content, if nothing else, as to where we think this budget will end up. But it'll be an ongoing monthly check and balance every month next year to make sure that our assumptions are correct, and we don't see it go farther down or up. If it goes farther down or up significantly, we have set some money aside to allow us to do subtle movements. So we've actually expanded our reserves as well, which is something we've been working to do. So we're expanding our reserves so that if we have subtle movements, we can actually use our cash in order to do that. Otherwise, we go in there with full-scale service model changes. And so, but I think this gives you a very good picture as to where we're at right now. We'll be inviting some individual counselors in next week to look deeper at the numbers, and so that we can kind of be prepared. And so I think that's where we're at. I just want to leave that with that, because I agree that the challenge will be is taking whatever revenue or whatever resources we have for these projects and allocating them appropriately. We're not going to be able to keep the pace that we had in the past. It just won't, the numbers don't work for that. And so that'll be the challenge that each of you have. So thank you.
On that, going from what you've just said there, since you've already sort of opened up and alluded to it, I've already picked up the memorandum that came from the staff economist for the legal finance, the LFC, and concerning the consensus revenue estimating group for 2020 interim review of the revenues. And it's some pretty scary information in here. We've got to really consider and understand. I don't know how everyone handles their household, but we can't spend more than we bring in. And two things in particular in here, with two paragraphs. It says, based on the group's preliminary review, recurring revenues for fiscal year 20 could decline about $370 million to $480 million below, not just declining 480 million, but 370 million to 480 million below the December 2019 forecast. Given the extent of the anticipation review declines, the balance of the operating reserve, previously estimated to be $259 million at the end of FY20, will likely be insufficient to cover total FY20 appropriations without changes to spending and authorization to utilize another reserve fund. The way I explained it to the mayor this morning, this is almost like the Bill Richardson recession on steroids. Not blaming anyone, I'm just saying that just happened to happen during his administration as governor in his last year, when we had projects being pulled back left and right. I think of one in particular when we had the lights out at the Lion Hondo baseball fields. And we had already started into that project. We'd already cut down the old wooden light poles, dismantled, pulled away. Then the money was taken away, and we had a little league that went without lights for a significant amount of time, couldn't even play games on some of those fields, one in particular, because of that. We're in a situation to where projects that have started to encumber, we've got to hold back in recognition. We can't just jump out there and start just pushing to do projects so that we've got money invested so that the state won't pull back. When there's no money to send a check with, there's just not. The other thing about this that was very scary that we've got to consider, it says, additionally, the preliminary review shows reserve balances are likely insufficient. So the reserves are likely insufficient to cover the extent of the projected revenue declines for FY21. The recurring revenues for FY22 could fall substantially below the FY21 recurring appropriations. In other words, there's going to be nothing. This is some pretty significant information that's coming to us, and so we have got to tighten our belt beyond what even our comfort zone is. There's just certain things. If we get to a point where we've got to start doing away with things, we get rid of the cable TV, we get rid of the certain things that to be able to live within the means. And I appreciate the works that are going into this so far, because this is significant, and I think that anyone watching or listening has got to understand. Originally, we're looking at a 15%, then a 20%, then a 23%. Now we're looking at a 25.3%, and this may not even be out of the woods with that. So we've got to consider those things. Do you have anything else you'd like to?
No, sir. And that is our fear, is that, we are trying to determine what the future is going to be without really having a clue as to what will eventually happen. And I think that's why we're setting up the structure, is that we're going to try to be as conservative as we can be, and then be able to function on a month-to-month basis as to how to pull back or how to push forward with all of this stuff. There is not a service that the city provides that will be unaffected by this change. There are service models that we have to reduce. There are wholesale adjustments that we're going to have to go through. We're going to have to look at additional types of revenue or changes in that service model. Those are the only things that we can do. Reduce expenses or find new revenue. And the chances of finding new revenue are outweighed by the need to reduce expenses, so.
Did you have something you want to add, Councilor?
Question, yes.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So on this budget reduction of the 32 million, and you may not have the answer to this question, I'm going to ask it anyway. So I know that every year typically we have a certain number, 20 to 60 of positions that never end up getting filled. They all get budgeted and not. We've kind of used that as a safety net in the past. And now basically we're saying that that's not a safety net anymore, because that gave us a little bit of leeway, because we budgeted for positions, again, 20 to 60. I'm assuming that there's no positions left there's no positions that are open in this that has that leeway anymore in this particular
No.
budget.
No, and there is, that safety net is gone. Essentially, in order, and we are going through the least impact cuts all the way to the more extreme cuts. And so we have removed all open positions that we had from that list already, and we still are looking at needing to adjust the budgets farther. That equates to almost 14 to 15 other jobs. And so.
So on this, I guess my question is, and again, I don't think you necessarily have an answer now, but what percentage of these dollars that we're saving were already jobs that weren't filled? You follow the question?
That I will not be able to answer
Sure,
today.
I think that's
but-
an important thing, because I think that, to me, that says, is this number tight enough? Because again, in the past, we've kind of relied on that to give us a little bit of wiggle room, which is that wiggle room is going to go away. And we need to be very careful about that as we're comparing year to years, because I think that if we took off so this is budget. So the 2020, that's budget versus actuals, correct?
That is budget
Yes.
to budget.
So that would
yes.
include the unfilled positions.
It does.
And I think we need to be careful about, whatever dollar amount that is, that's kind of a fuzzy amount, because that was money that we didn't end up spending and how that was budgeted anyway. So just, I'll be curious to know what that number is, how much we're recovering from that, the money that we weren't really spending. So it's kind of like, did we really cut the budget that
we
much?
are preparing that information,
Yeah.
Counselor.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yes, Councilor Orpesa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe, are you planning on having a workshop of any sort with the full council to address this instead of just the finance?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we're planning on an actual workshop. We are going to set the budget aside for a special meeting of the city council, as in the past, to walk through all of this. We would have, we were going to have individual city councilors come in and discuss at least, some of the members of the finance committee to come through and say, this is where we're projecting, this is what we're looking at. We're not against doing any kind of a special session on this to some level. I know we're going to have a separate meeting on this as we lay it all out there. We probably should just schedule the right amount of time to walk all the way through it. I know that we'll have a little bit of time because again, we're tight on the constraints as to when we have to report to the state as to what our budget is. So we have to do the DFA reports, I think that last week of May. And so we've had 2 weeks here that we can kind of look at trying to find special sessions. I know that we were planning on trying to get the budget written over the next few days. We're doing the final calculations on some of the numbers, and then we're going to get the verbiage that goes with the budget all set up so that by toward the end of next week, we would have a completed packet that can be sent out to everybody individually so that they can at least read it over the weekend, and then we can set up that time. So we're all for a special session, or we do it in a full-blown council meeting where you can take action. So either way works for that.
I would prefer to have a workshop as opposed to a council meeting.
Okay.
And mainly because in the workshop, obviously, I mean, you don't take any action, but you get a lot of information.
Certainly.
You get to ask and receive information, and then have time to digest that information, as opposed to come to a council meeting and then being asked to digest that information right there and then vote
Certainly.
on it. So my suggestion or my request would be to have a workshop
Okay.
and allow all the council to come in and hear, because this is the most important part of our jobs, is the
Yep.
budget. And so I think everybody should hear it firsthand.
We'll have that conversation with the mayor and all of the chairs and everything, all the city council. We do have a city council meeting next week, so we can at least make sure that we kind of find out what works for everybody in order to get there. I think you're correct. The information is very important.
I think the struggle we're going to have is the ability to finalize to some degree the staff's recommendations and working with us to come up with a proposal, and then have workshop, and then have time to have council before we're approving.
And one
It's
other
gonna be a
suggestion, though, is
timeline.
the nice thing is that essentially at the end of the May meeting, we set the preliminary budget. We will come back and take action at the end of June on when we know what all of our final numbers are for this. And so we can make adjustments in the budget for that next period. I believe, Monica, you agree with that as well?
Yes, DFA does not require us to send in a resolution for the preliminary budget. We will just need to send in a resolution for our final budget.
So we could build the time out. It just may not happen until after we do the first action.
Correct. Right.
Okay?
All right. It's gonna be a situation, we're going to have to start thinking outside of the box. There's gonna be some major changes. We're not going to be able to have business as usual. I think that a lot of us would love to see everything reopen, see everything go back to normal, but even if everything was reopened today, we're gonna have a new normal. We just have to face where we're at with that. We're gonna need to, it's not just about with employment and trying to think of different ways to try to come down off the budget with that, but also in services, also in things that are quality of life. We may see areas where we need to even consider some liquidation in some departments. I mean, I don't want to jump into a ring of fire here, but with the museum, we look at the museum, we have to look at each one of them in particularly and differently. With the museum, we do at least have the opportunity to put on the table the possibility of some liquidation in order to meet the need in that area and some of the others. So just throwing that out.
And I think just to build off of that just a little bit, just to help so that you're not out there just talking about that one all by itself, we went through a whole exercise on the zoo and making adjustments to how we wanted the zoo to operate into the future. So that falls right into this whole line of this whole concept. The golf course is another example of one that we chose to allow some of that golf course to go back to rough, so that we're not cutting around, we're not trimming around the trees as much. We're allowing some of that area to go back to a little bit higher grass. It makes it a little more competitive for those golfers because they can't hit into the rough and find their ball as easy now. But the whole idea was to help change that model back to what we're capable of doing. And I think when you look at the liquidation of different services and everything, that's going to be the challenge that you're all faced with.
All right. Yes.
Just,
Councilor
and I know we need to get going on the agenda. One more, since we're talking about that, one quick comment. I think that it's important that, as we evaluate this, that some things are going to get cut more than others because of their importance to the community. And that's going to be the hard decisions the council, of course, is going to have to make, and we will be rewarded or punished at the ballot box for our decisions, and that's our job, and that's fine. But what I'm going to be fighting for is that, and this is something that, and I hope this isn't throwing you under the bus, Joe, but Joe said early on, he said, I'd rather do less well than do a lot poorly. And I assume he still have that mind frame, but
Yes, sir.
I would tend to agree with that philosophy of we need to do if we can't afford to do everything, let's not do everything poorly, let's do less, but let's keep a level of excellence and
well.
quality to what we are able to do and then build from there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joe. At this time, we've got a Tyler update. Is that coming from you, Monica?
Excuse me, that's correct, Mr. Chair. We have Chanel Ray, one of our accountants, who is the project manager for Tyler, to give you a bit of an update.
While she's coming up, let me just mention, I had some folks text me saying they could not see what was up on the screen, but I think that's been resolved, and we've got that up, so that's great, wonderful, thank you.
Good
All right,
morning.
thank you, ready,
No,
go ahead.
All right, good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. As some of you may know, we're currently working on 3 different phases of Tyler. We have Intergov, which is for planning and zoning, code enforcement, and business licenses. HCM, which is for HR and payroll. And we are in the very early processes of utility billing. So Intergov is scheduled to go live the first week of June. We're maybe going to do something a little different with them because of the COVID-19 situation. We are talking about doing a remote go live, which is not traditional, but they actually had another client recently who did it remotely, so they're going to let us know how that went so we can try to stay with our go live date of the beginning of June. HR and payroll is scheduled to go live July 1st. We are still on track for that at this time. And utility billing will be towards the end of the calendar year. So with utility billing, we're in the very early phases, doing conversion passes, looking at tons of data, making sure everything's coming in correctly. So I don't think we have much of an update more than that at this time, so if you have any questions.
Any questions, comments from committee members? Councilor Roebuck.
Thank you, Chair. So I think what would be, we've been working on this a while, and this is really it's been an exciting project, and I think it's really going to help the city. It has already helped the city, but if we're getting close to the halfway point in this process, which it kind of feels like it is, but maybe I'm wrong, it would be nice to have some, maybe at our next report, to have some data on, okay, these are the ways that this has helped us improve with the stuff we've implemented so far.
Sure.
So we've been doing, whatever parts we've been doing them now for 6 months this way. This is how it's helped improve the process. I think that would be great information for us to have. I love having that information. So when I go out there and talk about, hey, behind the scenes, this is what our staff is doing to do a better job, and this is the ways that they're improving. I love sharing that information with my constituents. So if you wouldn't mind giving us some of that, because I know this has been a significant investment of capital as well as of your time and energy of staff to make this transition. So it would be great if we could start talking about some of the fruits that we've been benefiting from already. So I'd sure appreciate that if that's possible at all. The next time you guys do a report, that'd be great.
Definitely, and as you may know, we were doing budgets in Excel before, and so this is great to have because we do it in the system and we can export it to Excel, so we still can use the tool, but we're not solely relying on spreadsheets.
Another great thing, Counselor, is the reporting. You call me today and want to know what a budget looks like right now as actual, and it takes me just a hit of the button to give that information to you. So we are definitely feeling the relief with the new system.
Well, I think that having that part of presentation for next month would be great, so we can have an idea of what that mark is where we've come up. Great idea.
We will have that ready for you
Okay.
next month,
Any other
Counselor.
counselors with any questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank
All
you.
right. Next, we have on the agenda for the seeking approval for resolution for the monthly budget amendment. Do we have a motion? Or let's go ahead and hear it first, and then we'll take a motion. Let's do it that way.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this is our monthly resolution that we have been bringing to the committee each month. These are resolutions that have to be when we are actually amending the budget, whereas to if we are adding an expense or adding a revenue to the financial statement, or if we are moving money from fund to fund, or if we are using any cash reserves. So if you will not pay attention to the abstract, it was a little misleading. This resolution has a twofold in it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to adjust revenue in various funds of a negative $22,855 and expense in various funds at a negative $22,855. We also want to adjust from our cash reserves in our road department, $868,845, and add that to the expense side on the road department. And Mr. Fuentes talked about that in his projects update, that we are moving funds from capital to road that are actually road projects. So this adjustment will help us do that so that we get the expense in the right place. Now, the reasoning for the negative $22,855, we did adjust for a police vehicle appropriation and actually recorded that twice in our books. So we need to reverse that. We also received some damage claims for our fire station number 6 at one of the garage doors. That's a little over $1,000. We received damage claims for our police unit of $2,700. And we received damage claims for our fire department bunker contents for $21,492. And we also received some accumulated depreciation for Station 5 at $13,000. That's in the general fund. In Fund 2623, that's our road fund. Of course, we just spoke about the 868 that we'd like to take from our cash reserve balance. That is about, it is at 1.5 million right now. We want to take 868, 845 and move the expense into the road fund project so that we have, as Mr. Fuentes mentioned, moved our roads to our capital, from our capital projects to our road fund so that we capture it a little better. And then our Fund 5100, which is our Air Center Fund, we would like to adjust it for revenue at $37,750 and the expense the same. And this also is a damage claim for accumulated depreciation on some of the buildings out there. And I'll stand for any questions.
Just a question real quick. This is new to me since I was on the council last with this being a monthly thing. Is this something that goes towards on the consent agenda?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. I was just going to say, man, if monthly, we have to.
Yes, we decided, Mr. Grant had decided to put it on consent because we were bringing it in every
Sure.
month. The
Okay.
reasoning for bringing it to you, Counselor, every month is because we would like to make sure that our books reflect with DFA each month
Cleaning
instead
the
of
months monthly instead of
monthly,
quarterly.
instead of holding it up 12 months and trying to decide and trying to reconcile. And that was a little difficult for us.
Okay. All right, that was just for my clarification. Any questions or comments concerning this resolution? Okay, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we refer to the full council to the consent agenda, the monthly budget amendment, Resolution 20, number to be determined.
Second.
I have a motion and a second that we send to full council for the consent agenda for the approval of the resolution for the monthly budget amendment. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by the same sign? Motion passes. Thank you. Let's move forward on to the request for the, and this is not an approval, I want to just make just a little correction there. We're actually not approving the audit financial statement for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2019. We can't approve. It's done, is what it is. We're accepting it. So just as a way just to fix that there. So who will be speaking to us?
Mr. Chair, we have Chris Garner, who is with Patillo, Brown, and, why am I forgetting? Well, who is our auditor right now. He is on the phone live with a go-to meeting, and he will present to you our audit for June 30th, 2019.
Okay, are you there joining us by phone? Can you hear us?
Yes, sir, I can.
All right, this is Councilman Perry. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. I'll just interrupt if we have any questions, okay? Please go forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have, I'm sure we need to move down on the slides or how we want to maneuver, but you should have a presentation that is a summary of the exit conference that we did back on December 10th. It took a little while this year for the financial statements to finally get approved. To be honest, I think it got misplaced at the state auditor's office because I had 2 audits where they were actually starting to respond to late audits, and so I was surprised that my other 2 audits hadn't been completed. So I gave the state auditor a call, and they got it taken care of there pretty quickly, but again, it was a slow process this year. With that, in the next slide, we talk about what was the result of our audit. So we issued what we call an unmodified opinion, or like I like to say, a clean opinion. So what that report says is that the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with our standards. And so, in essence, this is the highest level of assurance that we as auditors can give you, and this is the type of report that the city wants. On the next slide, we have 2 other reports included in your financial statements. The one on the left is what we refer to as a yellow book report. And what that yellow book report spells out is how we have to test internal controls differently. The New Mexico State Auditor requires us to do yellow book audits. And so we have to look at internal controls differently than we do in a regular audit. In a regular audit, we just have to get an understanding of transactions and internal controls. With a yellow book audit, we actually have to pick samples to test those internal controls. And so in that report, we don't give an opinion, we just spell out how we're testing differently, and then what we do is we report the results of our testing. And we'll go over that at the very last slide. We did have 3 findings related to that yellow book report. On the right, we have a report on compliance with each major federal program. What this is this is the single audit, which since the city spends more than $750,000 of federal funds, you're subject to a compliance audit. And so we have to go through a risk-based approach to determine which grants we're going to look at, and we go through and test those grants on compliance with the federal government. In this case, we do issue an opinion, and we did issue, again, the same type of opinion, an unmodified or a clean opinion. Again, the highest type of assurance that we as auditors can give. We can give clean opinions with findings, but based upon our testing, we had no findings related to the single audit. The next slide is talking about difficulties encountered in performing the audit. And we as your auditors are required to communicate that if we have any. And the audit went smooth. When we asked questions, we're given the answer in a timely manner. When we ask for supporting documents, we're getting those documents in a timely manner. And so, again, the audit went smooth. We did not have any issues. So there's really nothing to report there. The next slide, I think, is really important for council. This isn't always the case where we come in and don't have any audit adjustments. So when we did come in to do the audit, we did not have any audit adjustments that we had to report or had to record to adjust your numbers. So what that tells you is that, your finance department is getting those transactions recorded properly, and we as auditors are not having to come in and change those numbers. So that should tell the council that the numbers that you're getting throughout the year you can rely on, and that as you're making those financial decisions throughout the year, we as auditors are not having to come in and make changes, that you should have good numbers that you're using. The second part on the right, we have what we call a past adjustment. So there was a new standard that was applicable this year, but it wasn't what we call material enough. So the impact wasn't big enough to alter the numbers in the financial statements. And so with this particular adjustment, it really doesn't affect how you keep your books on a monthly basis. We have, unfortunately, we have in New Mexico 3 different methodologies that we have to use. The council is responsible for adopting a budget and maintaining the records on a cash basis. And then we have to change that from cash to modified accrual to meet our standards. Cash basis accounting is not an acceptable, generally acceptable accounting standard that we can use. So we have to modify those. And then our standards also require us to do another change to go to full accrual. And so this particular adjustment only affected the full accrual. And again, it wasn't significant enough to alter the opinion of those reading the financial statements. So we did not record that liability that the standards were requiring us to do this year because it wasn't big enough. And so with the next slide,
Did we already do that one, Chris?
well, if no, we didn't. If we had disagreements, it's kind of related. Actually, and the next one is too. If we had disagreements with management, we'd have to let you know. So if management didn't, if we said a certain transaction needed to be handled a certain way, and they said, no, we disagree, we'd have to let you know, and that did not happen. The next slide is similar. If management went out and got consultation with another accountant, we would have to let you know. If we had a differing opinion, they went out and got consultation, we would have to let the board know, and that did not happen. So again, there were no issues there. The last slide is related to the findings. So based upon our testing, and most of this came up, as I mentioned, the control testing during our Yellow Book procedures. We had some issues with payroll disbursements. We had a few timesheets that were not signed by the employees, and we did have one timesheet that was not signed by the employee or their supervisor. In one transaction out of 25 in testing, the appropriate rates, there was a personnel action form that the approved rate could not be located, so we were unable to verify that salary was the correct salary being paid. And then we had some issues. We had 10 out of 25 where we could not locate the I-9. I think the payroll personnel had been transferred, and I think we had moved them to a new location, and during that process, they were unable to locate 10 of those. The next finding is relating to cash disbursements, and what happened here is we had 7 out of 25 transactions where the purchase order was dated after the invoice date. Really, the whole reason in getting a purchase order is to have the proper approval done prior to the transaction being entered into, and in this case, it was done after the fact. So we just need to ensure that we are getting those POs done ahead of time instead of after the fact. And the last finding is relating to internal controls over gas cards. During our testing of gas cards, it came to our attention that we really don't have a review process going over the charges that are being made to, by the various departments. And so there's really nobody going through and verifying that the charges are reasonable and are appropriate prior to the payments being made. And so our recommendation is to establish written policies and procedures to ensure that the respective departments are going through and reviewing all gas card charges prior to the payment being made. With that, I'll open it to any questions.
Okay, I have a few questions that maybe not for you necessarily, but more maybe for staff as to what we are doing in the findings. I'll just start with the timesheets and the I-9s, and I know I've already gotten some of this information, but so that the rest of the committee understands what have we done as a corrective action plan in this.
So referring to our timesheets, of course, every department is on execu-time, and each person in the department, when our end of pay period comes in, they get basically an email from our payroll administrator that they need to go and sign their timesheets. And then after that, they have to be approved by their supervisors. We have had this issue for a couple of years. Actually, before when I first got here, we had this issue, so then we took and decided to go on executive time to help with this issue. We're still seeing a little bit of either we forget, or I'm not sure what is going on with the departments and why they are not signing them, but we are looking back at this time. So with this finding, our payroll administrator will be looking back to make sure that we are signing and to get with the departments that are not. We do not have that in policy yet. We are adding that to our financial policies because we do have new policies out there. This year, this will be added, and
Okay.
our next, our I-9
Yeah, the
situation
I-9
was with
situation.
previous staff members who had thought that we could just file our I-9s in a binder, and no, not in fact, those need to be in each employee's files. So we
just-
have
just to
since
ensure
corrected that.
We are doing the I-9
Yes, we're doing the I-9, we
They
just did
were
not.
not being kept with the employee's file.
Yes, we did not keep moving with the procedures, so that has been corrected.
And
With,
I will interject a little bit there. With the I-9s, we've never had any issues until they were removed from the personnel files and then put into one file, and they just must have been misplaced. So that was not something that we had seen and had any issues with in the past.
Okay, so that issue's easily rectified and taken care of there. Okay, wonderful.
Yes, sir.
Okay, on the purchase orders, where are we at with that?
so the purchase order, the financial policies already state that a person needs to get their requisition with a quote. With what I did on that is I resent our financial policies out to the departments and to the department heads. Joe actually sent out an email on all three of these findings, that there could be repercussions with employees that do not follow the policies. So that has already been sent out with regards to payroll, with signing, with any POs that are being issued after the fact, because, that's a procurement issue as well. So we already do, Counselor, have that in our financial policies. Again, I want to stress that. They know.
Okay.
So
And then the
Joe
gas card?
Joe has put it out there. Gas cards, we need to, I am actually taking that role to figure out how and what's the best way to handle the gas cards. We have several gas cards out there to every department. And what is happening is they are not reconciling their portion of the gas card. The departments need to be reconciling their portion of the gas card. We as finance cannot do that. We are not the ones out there in the field putting gas. So that is also going into a policy and procedure that will be sent out, and we will also have some training on that.
Okay.
And of course, everything that's been going on has been a little crazy in our office, and then with our moving, but these things are on the top of our list to correct, which they always are in these situations when we have findings.
Okay. So the wonderful thing is out of the findings, these are easily.
These are easily corrected.
Easily fixed and everything, okay.
Yes, and DFA also will send us a letter in which they have, letting us know how we're resolving those, because we have to communicate that to Department of Finance, as well as the acceptance of the audit by the governing body. So as soon as I get that, then DFA, I will respond to DFA.
Any other questions or comments from committee members? Okay, all right. Well, sir, thank you so much for joining us by phone. I'm sorry if you've had to wait for an extensive amount of time, but we do appreciate this, and we appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, at this time, I would entertain a motion to accept, to send to full council. This will go to
Yes.
full council still. It will be on a regular agenda item.
On a regular agenda item with Mr. Gardner presenting as well.
That we so a motion to recommend to full council that we accept the audit and annual financial report for the year ending June 30, 2019.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to the next, consideration for a request from the New Mexico Department of Transportation for a 75-25 split to perform some paving at Southeast Main from Poe to McGaffey. We have Mr. Nehar here, so if you would, please just fill us in where we're at.
Mr. Chairman, committee, I am fortunate enough that two of us have already heard this presentation at infrastructure. I'll make it brief. We got a last-minute request from the DOT to participate in paving in Southeast Main. The total, it'd be a 75-25 split. The total cost is estimated at $520,000 and change. DOT portion is $389,000. I'm asking for $130,637.61, which would be the city portion. This would be for Southeast Main from Poe to McGaffey. And it's stated on the DOT offer, if we cannot participate, Southeast Main would only be paid from Poe to Hobbs. They are giving us time to make it through May Council. What they're doing is kind of similar to the same thing we're doing. They've got some leftover monies in this year's budget, and they've chose to address Southeast Main. And of course, they're requesting our portion. On the fiscal side of it, the street department has looked at their budgets, and these are their balances. Maintenance repair infrastructure is $111,000 and change. We were hoping to do some microsurfacing. Obviously, that's not going to happen because $100,000 will get you started. Some supplies and general materials, that's sign stock, and that kind of stuff. Cancellation of a salt spreader that would go in a dump truck. So we have a balance of $205,000. If we use $130,000 for Southeast Main, we would still have $70,000 to carry us the last couple of months for supplies. And we're using a lot of coal mix right now. It's just fixing up potholes. I stand for any questions. It's a very simple request.
Questions or comments from any of the members? Councilor Orr-Payson.
Mr. Nehar, just to make sure that I understand, the $130,000 that is being requested by the city as a match, you were able to come up with $130,000 for this budget?
Yes, sir.
Fiscal year 20?
Yes, sir. Existing budget, and I gave you the specific line items under financial consideration, under our line item of M&R infrastructure, under our line item of supplies, general material, and then canceling of a PO to have a third salt spreader. We have 2 salt spreaders when we're out there running salt. So that gives us a total available balance of $205,000 and change. The $130,000 is based on their estimate. Sometimes it might be lower, sometimes it might be higher, depending how much asphalt's used when you start paving a road. But yes, sir, the balance is available out of existing money as we stand right now.
Okay, thank you.
I would just say that I had some reservations, just not because of the project. We've got to pave roads. We've got to, I think we heard that we've been hearing that a long time. We need to be doing that, but my strong concern of where we're going to be next year. But I've spoken with both city manager and I think that Juan has also calmed my fears somewhat, that this $130K, that it is there and that we have the ability. This is an area of road that does need attention. I guess one thing I'd like to ask, and I know none of us have crystal balls to know, but we're starting to see some break up in North Main from some of the areas where we've had some of this done as of recent years. Are we expecting that this, I saw that the DOT expects this to last about it's a 3 to 5 year.
Well, North Main, we've been working on that for the past 10 or 12 years. We get a project every couple of years from the DOT. Depending on which section you're talking about, the worst section that we have is between College and Country Club. And if you remember, we did the driving lanes.
Right.
We have a request into the DOT. That would be $380,000 to put a surface on it. It'd be $180,000. We're offering a 50-50 split. We've been asking that for 2 years, Mr. Chairman, and we have got zero. I was surprised when this Southeast Main came up, because we'd been asking for North Main. Of course, we complained about Southeast Main. I tried to talk to the DOT and ask for relief on any of the shared routes. But Main Street, the thing that I have in the queue right now, if we could get some money, would be to do a microsurface on Main Street from McGaffey to Alameda, and then also on North Main from College to Country Club.
And that area of College Country Club was about 8 years ago, I think.
That was 2012.
Yeah, so it's had a.
And that area too is also, if you drive it when it rains, that carries a lot of water, and that's the biggest problem that we have. People don't realize, I mean, rainfall, we don't get that much, but when it does and it stays in the curb and gutter and the traffic running on, it's just like sandpaper. And everywhere else, when a person overwaters and you put it in the street, or the business is overwater, that's just creating potholes.
Right. Well, I think that my concerns have been resolved on this particular one, so.
One more comment. We would be leveraging the money, so yes, we're spending 130, but we're getting a $580,000 worth of product that we would share for those people coming into the gateway of Roswell on the south side.
Is there any concerns with a pullback from this, or we got pretty solid?
No, it's the same circumstance with the DOT. It's current money, and they just looked and saw they had this X amount of dollars, and we're fortunate that this squeaky wheel's being addressed, and we just got to participate.
All right. Councilor Roebuck?
Thank you, Chair. And I definitely feel like this is a good investment to make. Certainly, I think why this comes under extra scrutiny. Normally, this would be pretty much a no-brainer, but the extra scrutiny is because we're certainly at this point trying to, as the city manager has been giving the staff directive to try not to spend any money even out of this year's budget. But that being said, I feel like even at that higher standard, this project is still worth spending money on, and so that's why I'm supporting it. Thank you.
Councilor Kennard?
I would agree. I feel like this is important. That area is important. The streets are important. Everybody that is involved in the city gets beat up about the streets. And, you know, as I expressed in the infrastructure committee meeting, that this is a good deal for the city. And so anyway, I would support that it would go to council for the full vote.
All right. Do we have any other comments or questions for Mr. Nahar? Okay. I'd entertain a motion.
Chair, would you entertain a motion to put this consent?
That would be fine.
That's my
Yeah.
preference.
That would be
Chair,
fine.
Okay, then Chair, I make a motion to, let's find this thing, to approve the request for the MDOT for Nova chip paving on Southeast Main, 21-16, to refer it with our recommendation for approval to the full council on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Present full council on consent agenda. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for your support.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move forward in this area of the lodger's tax funding request. I've got Juanita coming in. I'm going to let her get up there. I do have some slides that I've asked Monica to put in there that I want to explain before we jump into lodger's tax funding. If we could move forward into the first, who has the clicker there?
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, just click on the first one there. The governor put out an email, or actually this came from the New Mexico Municipal League, I'm assuming was asked to be distributed through the different entities. Probably the school systems received it from their folks, probably the the counties received it from their organization. We got ours from the New Mexico Municipal League. This is just a sample of some of the things within the reopening strategy, if you would, being given out by the governor. It's hard to see on the screen there, but this first slide here is a simple framework for assessing risks. This was put out by Johns Hopkins University, or adapted from Johns Hopkins University and Bloomberg School of Public Health and some other places, CDC. What this does is it says, number of contacts from few to many, and contact intensity from low to high. As we look out here, golf courses and others are on the smallest area because, people are outside. They're not having that close contact. You've got retailers, museums, restaurants, houses of worship. When you get all the way over in the area that is the highest, according to CDC and Johns Hopkins and these others, of possibilities for risk, are trade show conferences, large social gatherings, concerts, spectator sports, and festivals. Those are right there in those four, or four right there in that high area in the northeast corner, if you would, of the screen there. So you can see, as we're dealing with things that are coming to us from the OTB, and I do appreciate the OTB, and they're looking at these different things that are coming, we have to look at some considerations. In phase one, if you'll look at the next slide there, phase one of the governor's reopenings would be, what would open, this would be mid-May. And this is not a guarantee, but it's a possible, and it says is estimated to start if New Mexicans practice social distancing. And the part one there would be all retailers could operate according to retail COVID safe practices at 20% fire code. Non-essential businesses generally may operate at 50% pre-crisis staffing levels. This would be, insurance companies, businesses, those kind of things. Dine-in would go back to with COVID safe practices, CSP, that's what this stands for, and which we really don't even know what those are. It says they're in development, at up to 50% occupancy, no bar stool or standing service, no live music. Gyms and salons would be able to open and operate according to the CSP model, which is still in development. Hotels would be permitted to open according to CSP at up to full capacity. Houses of worship could operate to CSPs at a capacity, which I find interesting, but I'll leave it alone, to be determined. Thought that was interesting. I'll stay away from that, though. That's not what this meeting's about. But there's all these others that have to remain closed. Theaters, casinos, instruction to stay home remains in place. All mass gatherings, including concerts, events, and social gatherings, all these still stay in place. You go to the next one, which is phase two. Then theaters could open, bars could open, casinos could open, but according to the CSP standards, which are in place at that time. What would remain restricted in June? There again, you go back to mass gatherings, including concerts, events, and large social gatherings. In early June, we're looking at that still being closed. In phase three, what would be open? You're looking at the vulnerable individuals instructed to practice social distancing and aim to reopen schools in August with modified schedules and procedures to protect students, faculty, and staff. What would remain closed even in July? Mass gatherings up to 100 people still prohibited. No large festivals or fairs. Some concerts and spectator sports may be permitted on a modified basis with capacity restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, what we're looking at is we still don't have clear direction from this governor as to what we are really looking at. We're seeing other states that are testing reopening and are so far becoming very successful. We're not going to have that in New Mexico, it does not look like, for a good amount of time. For that reason, we can only predict that our GRT is going to continue to fall and continue to fall and to continue to fall. I was in a Zoom meeting with an organization just this week in which a business owner was very candid with me and shared some very personal information. That their norm from a year ago was $16,000 in income for this small mom and pop business. and that went down. I can't remember the number. I think it was somewhere around 11, then down to 9. Or this last month that they had, it was like $3,000 compared to 16,000. So GRT on 16,000 versus 3,000, major difference. And that was someone who had the ability to take their business and provide online services to try to compensate. We have businesses that are going from 16,000, 20,000, 100,000 to 0 right now. We have businesses, I know of at least 3 here in Roswell, that are having to shut their doors, and with multiple others as the possibility. Every week that goes by that we are not opening up retail, that we're not opening up our ability to have commerce, is going to make it that much harder. With that being said, this has taken a massive strain. The hotels can open to full capacity all they want, but if we can't have the festival to bring people in for it, there's no lodger's tax funding to be able to cover some of these requests that we have. Concerts, whether it be the symphony, whether it be the jazz festival, whether it be any of these other organizations, if there's not lodgers and coming and lodging, then there's no lodger's tax to pay for these things. We also have to remember the incumbency that we have in the bond that covers the parking lot that we've put in across the street, the additions here. In many of those areas, we've got to consider those. So for that reason, I do want Juanita to explain. She's got some slides to cover some of these things, but we may want to consider in this, and my recommendation as chair is that we table all the OTB requests, the occupancy tax requests that have come forward until a later time. So with that being said, let me turn it over to Juanita and show us some of what you have come up with.
Sure.
Far and beyond what I've brought up.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the council, we had some questions regarding where we were financially at with lodger's tax, and I prepared this slide with the help of my colleagues in administration and our finance director. You'll see on the first bar the bed fee. The question was, what is our bed fee payment of $550,000? That would be for fiscal year 21. Our fiscal year 20 estimated ending cash balance was about $587, and then their projection for fiscal year 21 estimated revenue is at $525. And I do have Mr. Steven Martinez, Miss Monica Garcia, and Juan Fuentes. The bed fee, it can only be used for the convention center. It cannot be used for any of the special events. So then you look at your lodger's tax, which is the 5% that is paid to the hotels for people who are lodging that are coming to our events. Our cash balance as of March was a little over $1 million. Our fiscal year 20 revenue year to date was $930,000, and their projection for fiscal year 21 for estimated revenue was $886, which is a downward of 23% essentially. So then you go to the next graph, or the next bar. This is one line out of the full budget of lodger's tax. And so this line is the special event line that we allocate funding for these events. In fiscal year 20, our budget for special events was $61,881. When we started working on the budget and the directive was to reduce fiscal year 21 by 20%, that total budget allocation would be $50,000. And that is what was presented at the Occupancy Tax Board as their budget that would be going into fiscal year 21. Now that we have had a few more weeks and a little bit more understanding of where things might go, I know sitting on the Special Event and Festival Task Force with the State Tourism Office, the slides that you presented is what we went over on Tuesday in our call. We wanted you to just kind of understand where we are at financially and allow you guys to make the best decision moving forward, not knowing what the future really holds with the uncertainty. I can stand for any questions. I do have all of the requests prepared and ready. It looks like you have a question, Mr. Roebuck. Okay.
Before we leave this slide, I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So our bond payment next year is 550,000,
Yes.
correct? Right now, you are estimating our revenue for this year is estimated at 587,000 for the current fiscal year.
I
Is that-
believe that's the ending cash balance.
Okay,
which
ending
is-
cash balance.
Which is different than the revenue,
So
correct?
what, I guess my question, because I would love to compare that FY '21 estimated revenue is 525. What was our revenue, what's our estimated revenue for this year? Because that's the real question, is how much is that dropping off from that? Because do we have that figure
So you can
available?
refer, Counselor Roebuck,
Yeah.
to our
Lodger's tax.
Lodger's tax report, I'm sorry, our convention center report. That's in your packet. I want to say, without looking at it, that we budgeted about 660,000, which is around, yeah, it is, I believe it is 660,000. So if you look at what we budgeted this year versus what we're going to budget next year, that's,
So you're anticipating then, if I'm doing my math in my head, you're anticipating that bed fees are only going to be off by about 20%?
21,
Okay.
22.
And I feel like that might be a very unrealistic number. Do we have a reason to believe it's going to be that we're only going to be off that much? Do we have a reason to?
Let
or-
me ask Mr. Stephen Martinez to come in, because
Sure.
this is some information that he prepared.
While he's coming in, Counselor, I'm looking at the LFC memorandum concerning the Craig. In here, they've got some graphs and dealing with, and I found this interesting when they're dealing with the U.S. gross domestic forecasts and unemployment forecasts and these different things. They've got an optimistic probability, a baseline probability, and a pessimistic probability. I sort of fall in the line of a pessimistic probability, and then be grateful for what we have above it. So I think I'm agreeing with it. So, yes, go ahead. Yes, sir, you're on the hot seat.
So the way that number was,
Pull the microphone towards you a little bit so folks who are watching live.
okay,
can-
right there,
There you go.
okay.
Uh-huh.
So the way that number was arrived at was when we met earlier about a month ago, we determined a 23% reduction in revenue was what we're going to carry forward for the time being. That's where that number came from.
Okay, yeah, and I think that while that might be a citywide number that might be accurate, I think that, and again, who knows, but I think that there certainly is in the realm of possibility that revenue is going to be way less than, we're going to have less than we're going to have more than a $25,000 shortfall, more than likely. I can't imagine based on, even if you just consider the months that the hotels are going to rebound and get back up to 2020 levels next year. So I just wanted to caution putting that number out there, saying that shows a very small shortfall, and I feel like that, I think we do need to be, I hate to use the word pessimistic, but let's use the word conservative in our revenue projections, because I think we're realistic. I think that using that baseline as maybe citywide, might be right, because obviously GRT is going to be affected differently than bed fees, but bed fees are going to be significantly impacted more than your base level GRT. And so I just want to caution as we make these decisions to all of us, we need to think about that number there, because that's a pretty rosy picture to me right now. If we hit that, man, I'm so happy. I'm happy, but I don't think we can plan for that. Thank you.
If I may, one thing to highlight is that we will have our ending cash balance to meet next year's bond payment total. So we're not in a situation where we're not going to be able to meet our bond payment for fiscal year 21. Any decrease in estimated revenue I can take from your advisement, and I'll go ahead and change that. I use the directive of 23% to get to that number. So anything you guys decide, just let me know, and I have no problem changing that.
So, but I guess then, what you're saying, we can safely say is that we're not going to have to dip into lodger's tax in 2021 to make our bond payment.
That'd be
There's no
correct.
way that's going to happen.
Yes.
So, because, and as I think, as
Because of the reserve we have now.
Right.
My concern is I just don't look forward into FY '21. I look into FY '22 and FY '23 and FY '24.
Certainly.
And, currently, there has been at least discussion that the governor was not going to make a complete reopening until there was a antibody, or something.
Yeah, and
That could
definitely.
be so we're not just looking at a budget of 21, in my opinion.
No, and I think that I would certainly concur with the chair on that opinion. I just wanted to make sure it was clear with what we were looking at there as far as the numbers, and we can continue your presentation. I'll save my comments for later. Thank you.
Anything else?
So with that being said, are there any other questions for Juanita, or?
This was the only presentation that I did want to share before moving into the actual thing of the recommendation and the awards. With that, I just ask you to really evaluate kind of where we're at, and hopefully we can make a good decision to not, spend money that maybe we won't get to have these types of events as we are, the new word is pivoting and shifting our service model. I know we don't like that word because it's used so much. We learned a new word today on another call. But this is kind of where the financial situation is at, and we need to bring forward the requests as they've come through, and so that is why we are here today.
My recommendation is Councilor Place. My recommendation is that we table under further notice so that we can take a better look at what's going to happen. If this is what is being said, there's some of these events that are not going to be able to take place at all. So I would rather table until further notice and let us look and see what we have coming in. Councilor Payson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question. If we do table it and we go back and look at what the situation is the OTC going to meet again and re-recommend these events, or look at them and adjust them, or?
My understanding is once you guys table it, it would have to come back to this committee with the same recommendation that OTB had previously determined. Now, if an event has already passed, then they will need to reapply. We are working on a new model for lodgers tax that the State Tourism Department does, but not knowing how much lodgers tax will be available because of the uncertainty of the COVID, we're kind of pausing on that. But for example, if UFO Festival 2020 were to occur and this is still tabled, we would move on that. It wouldn't, that one would be null and void. Then we would continue if Bottomless Lakes or Bottomless Triathlon, that's usually end of June, beginning of July, I believe. If it's still tabled at that time, then that one is now removed. And it would continue in that manner until it's brought back to this committee.
Well, that's specifically the reason that I'm asking the question is because I just read that the UFO had canceled one of their main programs.
Yes, sir. The UFO Museum canceled.
They were granted or approved for $9,000. So now that they are no longer going to hold that program, would that $9,000 still stand?
So the UFO Museum is the one who canceled their UFO uologist speaker session. That is different than the Main Street Roswell group who puts on the UFO Festival. The request here is for the UFO Festival, and so they have not been granted or awarded the funds yet. It has to go through OTB, then to Finance, and then to Council for approval of award of funding.
It's a different entity. The UFO Museum had the one, right?
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You brought up something that I just want to touch on for just a second because I'm ready for us to get through this and be done.
Yes, sir.
I was sort of surprised in just the 2 years that I've been gone from council and coming back, even the changes and stuff that we've seen that come in, and I'm sure the vast majority is for the better. I'd like to see us try to find a place to a norm. And I know, because you just said, that the state's now got some new. And I'm thinking, oh, man, there's so much new that I've seen just in 2 years and how things are done.
Yes.
And now we're looking at new again. So I'd like to maybe work, towards getting to a new established norm that could be a consistency.
Yeah,
'Cause the state, of course, is in control of a lot of this, and we have to
Yes.
make changes with that, but hopefully that'll be something we can work towards.
Yes, and this, our current policy, our current procedures have not changed since December of 2017. No, I believe I know what you're referring to. Nothing has really changed in the process or the procedure for that. Unfortunately, we have some organizations that were confused and did not quite understand the process. We heard their feedback. We are trying to update we did update the website. We actually created a document for them to sign so that they know that what the process is. And unfortunately, I think with that, in that instance, they spent money before it was awarded, and that's a violation of our anti-donation clause. We cannot allow organizations to spend money before the council has approved funding for use.
Okay.
So.
Councilor Pace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the problems is that the OTC is meeting twice a year, or?
That is correct, yes.
And I think that puts a burden on some of those organizations. And I know, I don't remember who we talked to, maybe it was the chair, that maybe they would consider having one meeting a quarter instead of twice a year, and maybe that would help those organizations get their information in a timely manner.
We will definitely make that recommendation to them. We were following some practices that other municipalities have. I think our challenge is awarding funding for another fiscal year before we even know what the budget is, and that's why the timing is April to August. But we will make that recommendation to them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me do something, not that I just want to drag the meeting on all day or anything, but I've just had something come to me, and I need to take just a personal 3-minute break. So let's just recess for 5 minutes and come back. So we're going to go into recess for 5 minutes, okay?
Yes, sir. Well, because I think some people get really confused because they think that we. Okay. Yeah. And this column, the.
All right, let the minutes reflect, Sharon, Madam Clerk. We are going back into session at 1:04. Okay, I had to step out for just a moment. We've been in this meeting a long time, but I understand that we have Perry Tolles on the phone that has requested to speak. So I'm going to give him an allowance, just like we would at the regular city council meeting, for 3 minutes, if he has something he'd like to. Okay. If you could give me just one moment to where we can get him on the phone there and make sure that we can hear everything correctly. Are we ready, Jeff? Perry, are you there?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. If you could please just state your name and address for the record.
Perry Tolles, P.O. Box 1300, Roswell, and would like to take just a few minutes on behalf of the Bottomless Triathlon to comment on some of the things that y'all just been discussing. I see that administrative directive of reducing the special event lodgers tax by 20%, and I agree with you that that's very optimistic. But the OT Occupancy Tax Board made a recommendation for the Bottomless Triathlon that was a lot less than a 20% reduction. It was the first time that our event has not been allocated some funds for promotion and marketing. We don't know what the governor's going to do, and we're waiting. But let me tell you a couple of things. I think we've done a great job of putting heads in beds. In fact, last year was probably the most people that spent the night in Roswell since since 36 years ago when we started this event. But having said that, let me tell you that the Bottomless Triathlon is not a spectator sport or a participatory sport, and I am ready to go forward with the 37th Bottomless Triathlon, regardless of what the mass gathering restrictions are. Right now, you can have up to 4 people because the mass gatherings are 5 or more. If you noticed on phase 1 and phase 2, there were not any numbers attached to the mass gatherings, and the governor could allow mass gatherings maybe up to 10, maybe up to 20, maybe up to 50 before she gets into the phase 3 and allows gatherings up to 100. But I have contingency plans, and regardless of what those restrictions are, the Bottomless Triathlon will go forward. If it goes forward under the current restrictions, we will move to a virtual bottomless triathlon. If we can have up to gatherings of 20 or 50, we will have a multiple staged triathlon where we will allow participants to reserve a spot on a number of weekends, maybe during the whole month of July, and we'll just have to hand tie them. We will not be able to afford to bring in the electronic timer. And if we can get to phase 3 before July, then we will go ahead and run a normal triathlon, although limited probably to about 50% of our participants. That's not going to allow us to cover our hard costs, but no matter what the scenario is, we're going to go forward with some type of event. And I've been actively advertising on Facebook. In fact, I've already put on 4 virtual events. They've only been running events, but if we have to, I'll put on a virtual triathlon event. USA Triathlon, a national governing body of triathlons, have issued guidelines and has provided a guideline page on how events can do that. And I've already proved that it can be done with these 4 events that I put on already. And it's been in conjunction with the Bottomless Triathlon.
Mr. Tolles, I'm sorry, your time is up.
That's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Perry. We're going to have further discussion in here concerning these things at this time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Did we have anyone else? That's what we...
Not at this time, Chair.
Okay, all right. Okay, you've heard from Mr. Tolles, and you know, these are hard decisions. They are very hard decisions to have to make. You feel bad. These have been things that have been staples of Roswell and of Chaves County for years and years, and this is uncharted territory in some of this. Councilor Kennard, you had mentioned earlier you had something you would like to say. Did you?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I wanted to just say thank you to Juanita, and thank you to Juan for getting us all this information so that we can, I feel like we're able to make good decisions based on the information that everyone's brought forward. And I do think that it's really unfortunate. I was very disturbed at the New Mexico reopening plan preview. You know, how can we move forward when we have so many restrictions? It's pretty terrifying, and so I just wanted to thank you all for your hard work. I know that this is every day and an ongoing thing for you, so thank you.
Councilor Roebuck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've talked about a couple things that I really want to comment on. One thing is, you know, I really, you know, looking at this, and I saw this a couple days ago, this plan that the governor is rolling out. I really find it hard to stomach the fact that it's the phrase that really kind of cooked my goose is estimated start if New Mexicans practice social distancing. She's our governor, she's not our mom. We are responsible adults, we are responsible people. It's our responsibility to take care of ourselves. And we're going to find that out here in Roswell. We're not going to be getting a lot of help from the state taking care of ourselves over the next couple of years as we recover from this. So this to me is, and I know that a lot of my constituents share this frustration. This is extremely frustrating that we are not being allowed to make rational adult decisions based on the information that we have. The responsibility for my health and your health has always been, it's my responsibility, and the citizens' health, it's each individual's family's responsibility to maintain their health. It is dangerous when we start making decisions on just a couple of data points, and I feel like that a couple data points have been driving these decisions, the over-marketed, flattening the curve, et cetera. Important data certainly should be considered, but there's a lot of other information and data, and in this case, I am, especially for our region of the state, the cure is going to be way worse than disease, and it's going to affect way more lives in dramatic, painful, hard fashion. So this to me is is disappointing, and also just leaving in the uncertainty. Uncertainty is the worst thing for our community, and leaving in the uncertainty. If what? What criteria is the governor going to be making decisions on? Is there a certain number of cases? What's she making decisions on? Or is it going to be whatever she happens to feel like that day? She needs to be able to establish and say, this is how I'm making these decisions. Whether you agree or disagree, at least we know then what criteria she's working on. But if New Mexicans practice social distancing, what she should be saying is, thank you so much for all the hard work you've been doing. That should be the message going out. Thank you for all the sacrifices that our community has been making to fight COVID. Not getting frustrated and not getting because she does not understand the situation that these small businesses are in, especially the large businesses too. Our city, we will be laying people off. People will be losing their jobs. And this is real. And for what? What did we gain? And that's going to be the analysis after this is all over. What did we lose and what did we gain? And I don't see that analysis being done. I don't see that we are really looking at the pain this is causing. So I am disappointed at this framework. I'm disappointed the tone it takes. And the governor's power comes from consent of the people. Consent of the people. And using emergency power, it's there for a reason. It's when you have no time to bring together the will of the people. She has had time to bring together the legislators. She has had time to call a special session and figure out what the will of the people is. And she has declined to do that, even though the legislators have requested her to do that. So I could not look at this and hear this data without saying that, because I feel like that's represents so much of the constituency that we have. And again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't take precautions. I'm not saying COVID's not real, but some of these things seem extremely arbitrary, and the lack of the clear guidance of where we're going to be and why we're going to be and why we might stop or why we might loosen or not loosen things. So we have no way to know what's going to happen is just hurting us, everybody, even more. That's on that. On something that Councilor Perry mentioned earlier, in 17, when we made the changes, which I wasn't on council then, but I was on the other side. I was on the requesting side. I think a lot of those changes in 17 came out, and correct me if I'm wrong, they came out because we were outside of compliance.
That is correct.
And so those changes were made not necessarily because we were trying necessarily to improve the system as much as we were trying to be in compliance. I do think that we do need to have a longer discussion about the effectiveness of lodger's tax and the best way to share this money. The challenge with a lot of this, and what makes it difficult for being someone who has submitted to this process, is these people are not marketing experts necessarily. Some of them do great jobs, some of them don't do a good job at all. And really, I think that it would behoove us to move to a plan where instead of offering dollars, we would say, hey, the city of Roswell is buying 25 billboards this year, and we would like to offer this billboard to you, as opposed to offering, then we take out the whole financial transaction, we take out the whole things, and we're just providing the literal stuff for them. So I hope that we will continue to have that discussion. So those are my comments. I guess my other comment is that, today I'm hoping that we just table all these indefinitely, and we'll see how they come back as the money is available and as it makes sense. But something that we don't want to do is, and something I cannot emphasize enough, is the people who put these events on, they're heroes in my book. Putting on an event, and these are all, to my estimation, these are all nonprofits. These are people who volunteer their time, like Perry Tolls, the Main Street Roswell. As many times as I disagree with what they do, they work really, really hard.
Yes, I agree.
And they give so much to this community. These are the people who make our community awesome. And I hope that in our actions today, that they know from myself, and I think from this committee I can speak for, that we appreciate them so much, and we hope that they keep fighting. It was good to hear from Perry, and I'm assuming we hear from a lot of these other people, is that we're fighting for our events. And I hope that people do keep fighting. We have to keep fighting for our town. If we stop fighting, we will die. I yield.
Okay. Thank you so much. I just think that we're at that place where we just need to make a decision, and we've got to be conservative with our thinking right now. So I do think it's wise to consider tabling until further notice. So, we have any more comments? Yes, Councilor Orpesa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I hear the bashing of the governor, and I take offense to it, because I think she's doing the right thing. I don't see the bashing of the the president, and the lies that come out of the president's mouth, and the support that is supposed to come from the president level. You know, I think the governor has a responsibility to all citizens. And she's basing her decisions based on medical information that she's receiving, not unlike the president that this allows the opinions of the medical people. You know, I think she is doing what she thinks is right, and I support her. And, you know, the fact is that even though we feel that we shouldn't listen to the state, but that's what we're signed up for. The fact that she puts out these directives, I guess if you don't like it, you can do whatever in the world you want to, and run the risk of getting arrested or cited by the state police. But that's the type of government that we live in. And, you know, I think that we should follow what our governor is trying to do. And perhaps the numbers don't show it here, but perhaps we're doing something right, because the numbers are low. And the fact that our economy is going down south, as some people think, you know, the economy is based on the fact of how much money is pumped into the economy itself. And there are safeguards that are put out. So just to say that because the small businesses are not functioning doesn't mean that our economy is going to come to a standstill, because the money is being provided by the government. And so, you know, I hate to disagree, but I do respectfully disagree with Councilor Roebuck and his comments, and especially when it comes to bashing the governor, because you don't seem to bash anybody else but the governor itself, and you don't take into consideration the things that the president and his administration is doing also. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I will try to draw us back into this being a finance committee meeting, but let me just say this. I don't think that this is a matter, I know that everyone can get heated right now and get frustrated, and it's easy to point fingers, but, you know, and I'm not wanting to get into politics, but right now, I don't think that others in this room are not bashing our president because our president's wanting to reopen the economy. Our president recognizes the state rights and the necessity of the economic issue. I will just say again, staff economist for the Legislative Finance Committee is stating this is not just thoughts, this is not just projection, this is just fact. If we continue to spend like we're spending, the government cannot, listen, anybody out there who believes that the city of Roswell can bail out, or the state can bail out, or the federal government can bail out, nothing's free. That money's coming from somewhere, and it's a deficit, and it's going to have to be paid. It's going to have to be paid. The situation with unemployment, getting more benefits right now. I'm just telling you, spoke with a gentleman yesterday, lost his job yesterday. And even with the unemployment benefits and the COVID benefits on top of it, which, by the way, is supposed to run out soon, even with those, he's only going to be bringing in a third of what he would usually utilize for his family, a third. He can't live off of that. So when government chooses to mandate the way the state is choosing to mandate, we're going to lose people like that to other states. So we just have to get to a place of just recognizing our place of needing us to be open. So we'll try to just sort of end everything there and get back on the finance. Just, yeah, something real quickly,
Sure.
but let's try to move on and get this done. I'd like to go ahead and get everything done for the day.
Yes, and I'll keep it brief. I do not know the governor. I have no qualms with her personally. I have no reason to doubt her character. She's not trying to do the best thing. Did not say that. I do take, if I was evaluating what the president was here, I might have comments on that. I am not necessarily the biggest fan of the president either, but that's neither here nor there. And I think we do have to be careful. This is something you mentioned doing, and this is financially related, if you want to bring it back to that, is that this money that's flowing in through these stimulus packages, number one, the money comes from taxes, which come from business. So we have to be careful that, sure, in the short term, hopefully we're strong enough and these stimulus packages don't hurt us too badly, but the bill will come due. And when someone gets a stimulus check for whatever they get it for, directly deposited in their account, that is their money, because they're the ones who pay the taxes. So it's not like that this money is coming out of nowhere. So certainly, thankfully, we do have a strong country, and we have a economy that can take a hit or two, and this won't kill us, but this is going to hurt a lot of people. And I do want to speak one more time for if you're a small business owner and you've put 5-6 years into building a business, and all of a sudden that gets taken away from you. That's like if you had spent 5 or 6 years getting an engineering degree, and someone came to you and said, by the way, I'm taking away that engineering degree, and you got to start over. That's the real world impact that this is having on people. And I don't think we should take it lightly. Thank you.
All right, if we could regroup back onto what we're dealing with lodger's tax, I would like to entertain a motion to table the lodger's tax request under further notice, unless there's someone out there who has another motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we table action items 7 through 15, which cover all the lodger's tax requests until further notice.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Let's finish the day if we could. If we could have our city manager come and discuss with us request for us to send to full council for the approval of a resolution creating a critical infrastructure security and response policy on utility plants, collection, distribution systems, and airport infrastructure. Joe.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and city councilors, thank you for your patience to getting to the end of this meeting. I'm going to walk through this. We only have the one slide to share with that. If we can get back to that slide. All right, yeah, I'll let you do it. I'll just go ahead and, rather than having any slides there, I ended up putting together a written report. I put that in each one of your packets today when I showed up. We'll publish this as well too, so that everybody understands what this background is. But as you're well aware, we charge expenses through indirect and direct costs. So that's how the system actually works within our budgets and everything. Many of our services in general fund are paid through indirect costs. There is also a recommendation through general accounting practices to allocate many of our expenses through direct cost procedures. And so that's how that system works, is that We'll charge variable, fixed costs in a certain way. We'll charge direct and indirect costs a certain way. But, and this is the reason why the city no longer writes off utility bills for like watering parks. So it used to be that we would just write that off because it was all one city pot. And now we have to allocate, we have to recognize the cost to the water utility for watering the parks. And so we had to change that for a general accounting practice. And so it is accounted for by paying for that service from the general fund of the utilities. Our enterprise funds of water, sewer, and the air center have unique characteristics related to security measures for that critical infrastructure. The importance of preparing for protection of the critical infrastructure became more apparent after 9/11. And at that point in time, for the cities that I was working through in that time, we looked a lot at trying to figure out how to better protect all of this critical infrastructure. Each of our enterprise funds have the ability to create their own security force response teams in order to manage their departments or that critical infrastructure for each one of them. It has always been my position, though, that emergency response is best handled by our departments that are dedicated and professionally trained for public safety. So this resolution establishes that the City Council recognizes that unique characteristic for these enterprise services, agrees that our public safety departments are inherently positioned to prepare and respond to emergency needs for each of those services, and requests the city manager to allow a proportion of those costs to be directly allocated through each one of the enterprise funds for that public safety service. If approved, city staff will update its emergency response plans for each enterprise department and provide annual enhanced training to the individual public safety departments on how to protect the city's critical infrastructure. This resolution allows the city manager to budget accordingly and is necessary to meet the expectations for protecting our critical infrastructure. At this time, our estimate and direct expense is set at 5% of our personnel costs for police, fire, dispatch, and emergency services, as all of the employees will need to understand and be trained in these critical systems and in their operations. The overall direct expense impact is estimated at $1,018,575. So what I'm asking to do is to make some of those expenses that are public safety in nature, make them correlate directly to what their service is for the utilities in a direct fashion. I stand for any questions.
Any questions or comments concerning the request for this resolution? Okay, I would entertain a motion to send to full council. This would need to go to regular item, correct?
Either way is fine. I think whatever's
We
acceptable
can go
to
to
the city
consent. I'm
council.
perfectly content with that. We'll have enough to deal with than to have to.
It is a resolution, so it could go onto the consent agenda or talked about
But as
further.
simple as this one is, unless there's someone who has a concern, I just soon put it on the consent, and if there's a counselor who has a concern, we can certainly pull it from there. Okay. So
That's-
with that,
we-
regardless if you put it on
Yeah,
full
we
council or
won't,
not, it'll be on.
that's, yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
so go ahead.
Great, then I move that we recommend for approval to the full council, Resolution 20XX, Critical Infrastructure Security.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to present to full council for the approval of this resolution. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I don't think we have anything else on the agenda except for it is Counselor Kennard's birthday.
Is it?
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, getting old? Older. We'll leave it like that, right?
Older, every day, but
So-
I'm grateful for this day, so.
All right, well, happy birthday to you. All right. Anything else you have?
No, sir.
We have public comments. I'm not sure if
Do
we
we have any
anybody.
public comments other than Mr. Tolles, who's already spoken with us? That was it. Okay. With that being said, we will call the meeting at close at 1:32. Meeting is adjourned.